When I was a young member of the House of Representatives and would have the opportunity to go to Washington, Trent Lott would spend time with a young member of the Mississippi House of Representatives, not his staff, not the chief of staff, not shuffling me off to someone else. Trent would sit down and spend his valuable time. Soon he became Majority Leader of the United States Senate and still was open to those of us that would come and try to somehow gain a little of the knowledge that he had, sit at the master's feet as we learned our way through the political process, because no one did it better than a statesman called Trent Lott. 35 years in Washington, D.C. Now, he was a very young man from Pascagoula, Mississippi, and no Republican had been elected from that district since the beginning of time, and Trent Lott was one of the very first as he went off to Washington in the 1970s. In 1981, he was elected House Republican Whip. We were so very proud to know that not only Republicans were there, but they were taking a leadership role. In 1988, I remember this campaign well, he moved to the other side of the Capitol when he was elected in the United States Senate. He served in that position for 19 years. And that body, Senator Lott, was elected the 16th U.S. Senate Majority Leader in 1996. What an amazing time it was for Mississippi to have our Trent Lott as Majority Leader in the United States Senate. He has done so much during that time. Senator Lott worked with both President Bush and Clinton in that administration. When they hung his portrait in the old Senate chamber, I went to that event, and the spokesman included President Clinton and Speaker Newt Gingrich. Now, when you can get those two men to brag about you, you are indeed something very, very special, and they did so. Since his time in 2006, Senator Lott was elected the Senate Republican Whip, again in a leadership position, giving him the distinction of being the only person to hold that position in both the House, United States House, and United States Senate. Senator Lott, as we are honored today to have him, is also a member and helped originate the Bipartisan Policy Center. I think we need them now more than ever. If I could only get Senator Lott to go back to the United States Senate for a week, I believe our problems would be solved. He's co-chairman of the Energy Committee for that Bipartisan Center. His resume is extensive, but I know more than anything you want to hear from him and not from me. I will tell you that now, after his retirement in the United States Senate, he founded another bipartisan Bro-Lott, along with United States Senator John Breaux of the state of Louisiana. One Democrat, one Republican have worked together since then in the Patton Boggs group. Senator Lott is a graduate of Ole Miss and the University of Mississippi School of Law. He and I were together at the football game. He brought Phil Graham. I brought Rick Perry. Both of them went home happy. We are not, but it is my great honor to introduce my dear friend and mentor and former Majority Leader of the United States Senate, the Honorable Senator Trent Lott. Senator Lott.
Thanks, Governor. Appreciate it. Okay, let me know anytime I can help. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed having a chance to visit with several of you from North Carolina and Alabama, and I've sent word to Jeff Sessions. I am thinking about running re-election, but it's going to be in Alabama this time. Just tell Jeff. I don't think he'll be too afraid. Thank you, Governor, for your always generous introductions. Bill and I have done a lot of work together over the years. It's always been a pleasure, and anytime you work with Phil Bryant, you're fixing to do some good things for the people and for our state. And I'm pleased to see you're the chairman of the Southern States Energy Board, and as you brought them right here to the Boulder Lodge in Biloxi, Mississippi, we're glad to have you here. We want you to spend time and money. We take credit cards, cash, promissory notes. We want you to help our economy while you're here. And, when Phil was introducing me, Phil Bryant always has some good stories to tell, but it reminded me about why I decided to retire from the Senate. It's not just because of what's going on up there now, even though I saw it was getting harder and harder to get positive things done, and it was getting meaner. But the real reason I retired when I did after 35 years, my wife said, "Don't you think it's time you get a job? I mean, like a real job before it's too late." And so I retired and joined up with John Breaux, who had been trying to get me to come out and join him. He had been out for a couple of years before I retired, and had been with Patton Boggs law firm, and then we got together, and we were trying to decide what to name the group, our firm. And so we thought, well, how about Redneck Cajun Incorporated? And my wife said, once again, no, you're not going to do that. So we became the Lott Group and worked together for 2.5 years, and then we did merge back into Patton Boggs, and we're working together there today. And we do a lot of bipartisan work. And it's not always, totally seamless and happy. You always have some disagreements philosophically, or between parties, or between husband and wife, for that matter. And so, when I was the majority leader and when I was the whip, both when we were in the House and when we were in the Senate, I learned early on that just walk across the aisle and find John Breaux and see if you can't get something worked out. It always used to make the leaders on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, nervous when John Breaux and I were in the back of the chamber conferring. We were known as the riverboat gamblers, but we were finding a way to agree. I tell the story about when we had the big Bush so-called tax cuts. Originally, that was supposed to be $1.2 trillion tax cut. But the numbers in the Senate were very close. In fact, we were only controlled by virtue of having the vice presidency. And John Breaux, typically of him, came over and pulled Olympia Snowe, a senator from Maine, off of our proposal. So I didn't have the votes. And so we tried to figure out, Olympia Snowe was convinced by John it was a little bit too high. So we started negotiating, and we wound up passing it. It was just under $900 billion. Now, where I'm from, in Pascagoula, Mississippi, son of a shipyard worker, if you can get $900 billion in tax cuts instead of $1.2 trillion, which you really wanted, that seemed like a pretty good deal. And so we took it, and it became one of the biggest tax cuts in the history of the country. But we did it in a bipartisan way after John Breaux stole one of my Republican votes. So I do threaten to kill him every now and then. But before I talk just about energy, just a moment about the elephant in the room. And I don't mean necessarily the Republican elephant. What's going on in Washington, and you legislators, you leaders and whips and members of governors' staffs and people that work in energy and environment, you know that this is not good, and they've got to find a way to work it out. One of the problems we have in Washington now is not just sometimes our leaders can't find a way to lead, we also need some followers. I was talking to these North Carolina legislators over here. Leadership is tough. It's always tough, and it's particularly tough when you have a very high voltage partisan atmosphere. But once the leaders listen to the members of the legislature, or listen to the governor or the president's positions, and make their positions known and come to a conclusion, you got to have some followers, or you're useless as a leader. And I think that one of the things that is at play in Washington now is, and a lot of people are not aware of this, there's been almost a 50% turnover in the Senate in the last 6 years, and there has been over a 50% turnover in the House. So you got a lot of new members that haven't been through it before, and they feel like they can get things done that sometimes they just can't get done. I do believe that now that Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell are actually talking, and they don't talk as much as Tom Daschle did and I did when we were in the leadership positions, they'll come up with something today that hopefully will get them through the current crisis and set up a process to have genuine tax reform, get some energy legislation done, and also begin to control spending a little bit. People are not aware that if they don't reach some agreements on how to deal with the national debt, if they extended it for 1 year, it would be $1 trillion, addition to the $17 trillion already that we owe, $1 million a minute for the next year. You can't, as Republicans would like to do, and I'm one of them, I'd like for that spending level to come way down. You can't do that. You have to plane it down in an organized and thoughtful way. You have to look at it in 10 or 20 years, because that's how long it took us to get to where we are. But I always like to leave on a positive note on issues like that. I think they're going to get something done in the next couple of days. I also do think that the younger members on both sides of the Capitol and on both sides of the aisle when they get elected to the leadership, the atmosphere will be different. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect or even necessarily better, but it will be different, because I talk to people like John Thune from South Dakota and Roy Blunt from Missouri and John Cornyn from Texas and Jeff Sessions from Alabama. They know that they've got to do better if the American people are going to respect the Congress. The highest, the favorable rating for the Senate ever in history was 82% favorable. You know when that was? It was after 9/11. You know why? Because they saw us working together in an aftermath of a disaster to get some things done for our country. Tom Daschle and I worked sometime when our conferences didn't agree with us. But we passed the Patriot Act. We passed a lot of things that helped us pull through 9/11, and people like to see that. So for those of us that are in legislative bodies or have been there, we know that that's what the people are expecting us to do some things that are right for our states or right for our country. And so, the subject at hand, I had great pleasure over the last 2 years to work as co-chairman of the Bipartisan Policy Center Energy Project. And it was quite an interesting experience for me. I served on the Energy Committee when I was in the Senate, and really got interested in energy as something that was important for our economy, but as Governor Bryant says, very important for national security too. When you talk to the Navy, you talk to the military, the Marine Corps, you remember Rommel always was a great German general, but one time he forgot the energy supply line, and the United States was able to take advantage of it. So energy is so important. But this group, it was co-chaired by me and Byron Dorgan, a Democrat from North Dakota. By the way, a state that all of a sudden has got tremendous energy boom, and now you can't even rent a house up there in North Dakota. A retired Marine General Jim Jones, who was President Obama's National Security Advisor, but he left that position and now is working in a number of fields, including energy. And former head of EPA, Bill Riley, who was head of EPA during the first Bush administration. But here's the kicker. We had 20 members of our energy project. It included the co-director of the National Resources Defense Council, an environmental group, and included the American Council of Renewable Energy, Admiral McGinn was his name. We had representatives from Marathon Oil, ExxonMobil, Honeywell, Booz Allen, Anadarko, the Brotherhood of Electrical Engineers, the chairman of the Arkansas Public Service Commission, the representative from Southern Company. Here's the point. We had environmental, academic, labor, oil, railroads, a total mixed bag that had different attitudes. And we want to try to come together after a year and a half and present a proposal that would be useful for the country and for the Congress and for the administration. And after a year and a half, when it was very difficult sometime, we came together and produced a complete report that we think will be helpful going forward for our country and for the legislature. Now, one of the first things we did was to look at energy policy for the country and in the administrations, not just this administration, previous administrations. And you know what we found out? We don't have a national energy policy. We do not have a coordinated national energy policy. Even though we've passed energy legislation in the past, it never is coordinated. We have 21 federal agencies that have a piece of the energy pie. But the key entity is not the Department of Energy, it is EPA. They're driving the agenda. So there's no way to really review what's going on. So the first thing we tackled was governance. And you as state leaders and even at the local level, you need some coordinated effort. So the first thing we did, and this is under the leadership of General Jim Jones, we said we need in Washington to have a national energy policy, and it should begin with a quadrennial energy review. Have all these different agencies and departments sit down and talk about what they're doing or not doing and what should be the energy policy. And the key point is that it will be chaired by the Secretary of Energy. So we, in effect, give some power to the Secretary of Energy. They actually need to eliminate some of these agencies and departments. They need to get a plan going forward. The great news story in America today is energy. While our economy has been struggling along, there have been great things happening in the energy area, the diversity, the jobs that are being created, the things that are happening in states under the leadership of governors and state legislators. And Phil Bryant, right out of the gate, made energy one of his primary focuses. So Mississippi, that has obviously struggled in the past with our economic situation under his leadership, and before that, Haley Barbour, we have really focused on diversity in our own energy policy in this state. And just having a governor and administration that thinks about that and focuses on it makes a huge difference. So we'll have this now. We're going to have to get the Congress to approve this. The president could do it, but he needs the imprimatur of the Congress say, we want the quadrennial report, we want this National Energy Strategy Council, and begin to get an energy policy. One of the bills that was set aside when we had the incident or the situation in Syria was an energy efficiency bill in the Senate. And it is co-sponsored by Rob Portman, a Republican from Ohio, who, by the way, was also our national trade representative and head of the Office of Management and Budget at the White House, and a senator from New Hampshire, Jean Shaheen, who, by the way, has a degree from the University of Mississippi, making her unusually talented. But she's a Democrat from up there, and they're both on the Energy Committee, and they came up with an energy efficiency bill. One of the things I learned, to my shock, as a member of this bipartisan committee that we had on energy, was that since 1973, we have actually had more savings by energy efficiency than we have by increased production. In fact, I argued with this Ralph Kavanaugh from the Resources Council about the accuracy of those numbers. But when I got into it, I found he was absolutely correct. Now, I'm a typical Republican in that I think what we should do for energy is just produce more of everything. You know, I want more oil, I want more gas. I have a unique attitude about where we should drill. My attitude is drill where it is. Wherever that is. I'm for nuclear. I think America has not really come to terms with what nuclear can do and how we should deal with it. France has figured it out. Other countries have. Hydro, we can have hydro and we can have salmon. We'll have to think about it and do it in the right way. So I'm for all of the above, but I've resisted some of the other things, the alternative fuels, the incentives, even though I've taken advantage of it. My house outside of Jackson, Mississippi, energy supplied by Entergy Company, I understand the CEO has been here, had an old geothermal capability that was defunct. So I went in and activated it, and my utility bill dropped by a third. So unlike some of my friends on the environmental side, I practice what they preach. I also drive a Mini Cooper, which gets about 35 miles a gallon. So, but my wife has a big car, so so I've been leery of, frankly, of how much we can do with wind and solar and how much we can do with alternative fuels, and I didn't like what we did on ethanol and all of that. But my attitude is, let's quit arguing over what we don't want to do. Let's see what we can do. I agree with the strategy that is being at least spoken by the administration and a lot of other people. Let's do all of the above. Let's see what we can do. I think we should phase out some of the government incentives and credits and so forth, but do it in an orderly way, a planned way. When you're dealing with some of these alternative fuels, if you don't know what the deal is going to be in a year or two, you won't make good decisions. I believe in market solutions more than anything else, but I don't think we ought to just cut it off right away. I do think we should have a plan to use federal lands more, but we're going to do that. We're going to have to fund the necessary administrative officials to make sure it's done correctly. I do believe that we can need affordable, efficient, and environmentally safe and clean energy. We can have it all. We argue a lot in Washington about is there climate change or not? Do we have global warming? And I think you can find statistics all over the place. But here's my attitude. Quit arguing over whether we have global warming or not. Just ask yourself this. Are we doing some things that is not good for the environment, the air? Can we do more in terms of clean coal technology? Well, sure. So let's see if while we've got this tremendous energy opportunity, that we can also think about how we can do it safely and cleanly and do it better. And when you develop that attitude, then things are not Republican or Democrat or conservative or liberal. They just a belief that this is a unique time and opportunity for America in the energy area. It's good not just for the federal government, it's good for the states and the local governments. They have a role to play clearly too. And we can really make a huge difference. I've been leery about providing funds to the Navy for alternative fuels to drive our ships. The Secretary of the Navy is former Governor Ray Mabus from Mississippi, and we've had some pretty hot discussions about that. But I also know this. Some of the best energy things that have been done in the last 50 years have been done by the Department of Defense, both in the way they do energy efficiency on the bases, the way they've learned to move the fuel to where they need it. And so I did agree that we should provide some funds to see what different ways we can fuel our ships other than nuclear or oil and blends. So we're definitely working on that too. So with our group, we came out with a paper called America's Energy Resurgence, Sustaining Success and Confronting Challenges. Obviously, one of the big challenges is infrastructure. How do we transport all this additional oil and energy? We're finding out in North Dakota and Pennsylvania, instead of moving it by pipeline like we should, I'm all for the Keystone Pipeline, and I think eventually we'll have it, but all of a sudden the railroad industry cannot build railroad cars fast enough to move oil and gas out of Pennsylvania, North Dakota down to or over to where it needs to go. And also we're beginning to talk now about, well, we're number one in the world. Bill and I were talking about that. We have replaced Russia as the number one energy producing country in the world. So then the question is, well, should we export it? Should we reverse the LNG plant over there in Louisiana that was going to import LNG? Now we're going to reverse modify it so we can export it. Some people don't want us to export coal or oil or LNG. Once again, I believe in a free market. If it makes sense to do it, we can. There are a lot of people around the world, countries that are allies like Korea, that need the energy supplies we can give them. And once again, it plays back into the security issue. So there again is a great opportunity as to what we can do with the jobs that will be created, engineering these capabilities, making sure they're done safely and properly, and that it doesn't undermine our own economy in America. So there will be a lot of work on that. But we have talked about in this committee we should pursue diverse portfolio of energy. We should improve energy productivity. We should accelerate innovation and technology. We're not putting much money in America today into the energy area. We need to be doing a better job of that. And we should improve energy policy governance and accountability. And I do think that we should, in some of these areas, begin to have a plan to phase out the government subsidies that have, I think, disoriented the market. In the wind area, when I was going to the airport this morning, I had a call from Texas from a guy that's got 1,000 acres, really well situated, and he wants to put, he's going to sell the rights to put a wind turbine farm on his land. You know what he was calling about? He said, I don't want Chinese-made windmills or other foreign country. I want American-made wind turbines. Can you connect me with somebody that could help me? And I said, well, I happen to know that GE produces these windmills, wind turbines, and so we're going to get him some names and contacts to make. So, but that was a shock to me that I'd get a call from a guy in Texas that's going to be selling the rights to put these windmills, and part of his contract he's going to demand that the equipment come from an American company. I like that too. So I guess what I'm going to wrap up here, I don't want to do a filibuster. We've got enough of that in Washington. I'm going to just wrap up by saying that I think this Southern States Energy Board is a great idea. I hope you will continue to explore it. One of the things that I advocated toward the end of my career was that, between Texas and Mississippi and Alabama and Louisiana and Florida, we should look at the region like there are no borders. If it's good for Mobile, for EADS North America to be putting a plant to assemble aircraft in Mobile, that's good for Pascagoula, because we figure we won't get 40% of those jobs. And if we can do something at Stennis Space Center, I figure, a third of the people that work there are going to be from Louisiana. And if we look at our strengths and our weaknesses across these borders throughout the South, we can achieve a lot more things, and we could learn from each other. I had an uncle that was a state senator, Arnie Watson, World War II, 101st Airborne guy, and a super guy, chairman of the Temperance Committee, because he didn't think we should drink. That went out of style a few years ago, but I loved him, and I used to follow him around, and I guess he kind of imbued politics into my system, because some of my earliest memories were of handing out push cards at rallies with him. And I used to ask him as I got on up in high school, well, where do you get the ideas for legislation that you push? He said, I get most of it from Oklahoma. And I said, well, why Oklahoma? He said, well, we have a lot in common. The people there think a lot like we do. We have a lot of the same natural resources, although they have a lot more oil. And I've just got some friends over there that have some good ideas that we're going to try to put to use in Mississippi. So that's one of the great things about this. I know y'all are talking to each other, and the governor is going to learn from me. One of the things I always enjoyed was when Alabama got the Mercedes plant over there outside of Tuscaloosa. You had some great ideas of how you did that. And so we invited the guy that really did that for you, head of your economic development in Alabama, come over to Mississippi and tell us how you did that. And he was very generous, very magnanimous. He told us. And then about 5 years later, we competed with Alabama and Georgia for the Nissan plant. We used the ideas we learned from Alabama and got the plant. Richard Shelby has not forgiven me till this day. But then the next plant was Hyundai, and we were competing for that, and they turned the tables on us. Alabama got that plant, and then we went after Kia, and Georgia outbid us on that one. But we learned from each other, and we competed, and we did well. One of the things that I finally concluded was that Mississippi was not getting its fair share of domestic industry. And so after talking to a lot of our other leaders, we started focusing on international companies. And I don't know how many we have here now. Phil just announced the new tire plant up there in northeast Mississippi. We've got at least a dozen major international companies in little old Mississippi. And so I do think we have a great opportunity now. I think for you to come together with your backgrounds of leaders and legislative and administration officials and exchange ideas and think broader beyond just the boundaries of our individual states is a very, very healthy thing. That's what the Bipartisan Policy Center was all about, to come up with some specific ideas. And we're going to work with the Senate on the energy efficiency bill to make sure that they can move that bill once we get through this budget crisis. And one of the things that I've suggested to Senator Portman and to Mitch McConnell is pull off all the amendments that don't relate to energy. One of the amendments that stopped the bill was related to Obamacare. Well, we can argue over Obamacare, but on an energy bill, of course, the difference in the House and Senate, you can't offer non-germane amendments. In the Senate, you can offer anything, anytime, any day that you want to and ball the Senate up forever if you choose to do that. But if they would just take the non-energy amendments off, go ahead and vote on the Keystone Pipeline. That does relate to energy. But get this energy efficiency bill and follow that with the governance bill. They could do 2 or 3 energy bills in the next year that would be good politically, that'd be good for the country. So I wish you well in your efforts. Let's keep this going. If you're ever in Washington and you want to drop by and meet some of the energy experts at the Bipartisan Policy Center, they've got some really, really talented people there. And they helped educate us so we could do the job. Thank you, Phil, for inviting me. Thank you all for letting me visit with you. And I just want to say again how proud I am that you're doing this, and you've done it here at Biloxi, Mississippi. Thank you.